Hey everyone. This is from Anton Pannekoek's Workers' Councils. Yeah, I'm going to read the preface and the first section of the first part of the book, which is titled The Task. The preface says, and this is by Robert F. Barsky, it says, Anton Pannekoek's original Dutch text was undertaken in 1941 during the occupation of Holland by the Germans and completed after the war in 1946. It was published in Dutch in 1946 and then translated by the author with some modifications and additions for serial publication from 1917 to 1949 in the Australian monthly Southern Advocate for Workers' Councils. The book form of the English language version was used as the basis of the present text, although some minor corrections have been made to improve readability. I wish to thank Rachel Rakes, Jeff Rector, John Yates, and the members of the AK Press for their devotion and excellent work. Robert F. Barsky. What was I going to say? Yeah, this is the AK Press publication. I'm reading from the paperback. So if there's things that I could be looking up if I was reading a PDF, I'm not going to be. So you'll have to bear with me. So this section is titled Labor, and I think there's enough. The pages are long enough where it would make sense, be worthwhile to record each little section as its own thing. Just because I feel like it's easier to, people are more likely to listen to something that's a little short. And so am I, honestly. Section 1, the task. Or Part 1, the task. Section 1, labor. In the present and coming times, now that Europe is devastated and mankind is impoverished by world war, it tends upon the workers of the world to organize industry in order to free themselves from want and exploitation. It will be their task to take into their own hands the management of the production of goods. To accomplish this great and difficult work, it will be necessary to fully recognize the present character of labor, the better their knowledge of society and of the position of labor in it, the less difficulties, disappointments, and setbacks they will encounter in this striving. The basis of society is the production of all goods necessary to life. This production, for the most important part, takes place by means of highly developed techniques in large factories and plants by complicated machines. This development of techniques, from small tools that could be handled by one man to big machines handled by large collectives of workers of different kind, took place in the last centuries. Though small tools are still used as accessories and small shops are still numerous, they hardly play a role in the bulk of the production. Each factory is an organization carefully adapted to its aims, an organization of dead as well as living forces, of instruments and workers. The forms and character of this organization are determined by the aims it has to serve. What are these aims? In the present time, production is dominated by capital. The capitalist, possessor of money, founded the factory, bought the machines and the raw materials, hires the workers, and makes the workers produce goods that can be sold. That is, he buys the labor power of the workers to be spent in their daily work, and he pays to them its value, the wages by which they can procure what they need to live and to continually restore their labor power. The value a worker creates in his daily work in adding it to the value of the raw materials is larger than what he needs for his living and receives for his labor power. The difference that the capitalist gets in his hands when the product is sold, the surplus value, forms his profit, which, insofar as it is not consumed, is accumulated into new capital. The labor power of the working class thus may be compared with an ore mine, that in exploitation gives out a produce exceeding the cost bestowed on it. Hence the term exploitation of labor by capital Capital itself is the product of labor. Its bulk is accumulated surplus value. Capital is master of production. Capital has the factory, the machines, the produced goods, the workers work at capital's command. Capital's aims dominate the work and determine the character of the organization. The aim of capital is to make profit. The capitalist is not driven by the desire to provide his fellow men with the necessities of life. The capitalist is driven by the necessity of making money. If the capitalist has a shoe factory, the capitalist is not animated by compassion for the painful feet of other people. He is animated by the knowledge that his enterprise must yield profit, that he will go bankrupt if his profits are insufficient. Of course, the normal way to make profit is to produce goods that can be sold at a good price, and they can be sold, normally, only when they are necessary and practical consumption goods for the buyers. So the shoemaker, to produce profits for himself, has to produce well-fitting shoes, better or cheaper shoes than others make. Thus, normally, capitalist production succeeds in what should be the aim of production, to provide mankind with its life necessities. But in many cases, where it is more profitable to produce superfluous luxuries for the rich, or trash for the poor, or to sell the whole plant to a competitor who may close it, show that the primary object of present production is profit for the capital. This object determines the character of the organization of the work in the shop. First, it establishes the command by one absolute master. If he is the owner himself, he has to take care that he does not lose his capital. On the contrary, he must increase it. His interest dominates the work. The workers are his, quote, hands, and they have to obey. It determines his part and his function in the work. Should the workers complain of their long hours and fatiguing work, he points to his task and his solicitudes that keep him busy till late in the night, after they have gone home without concerning themselves any more. He forgets to tell, what he hardly understands himself, that all his often strenuous work, all his worry that keeps him awake at night, serves only the profit, not the production itself. It deals with the problems of how to sell his products, how to outrival his competitors, how to bring the largest possible part of the total surplus value into his own coffers. His work is not a productive work. His exertions in fighting his competitors are useless for society, but he is the master and his aims direct the shop. If he is an appointed director, he knows that he is appointed to produce profit for the shareholders. If he does not manage to do so, he is dismissed and replaced by another man. Of course, he must be a good expert. He must understand the techniques of his branch to be able to make the work of production, to be able to direct the work of production. But still more, he must be expert in profit making. In the first place, he must understand the techniques of increasing the net profit by finding out how to produce at least cost, how to sell with most success, and how to beat his rivals. This every director knows. It determines the management or business. It also determines the organization within the shop. The organization of the production within the shop is conducted along two lines, of technical and of commercial organization. The rapid development of techniques in the last century, based upon a wonderful growth of science, has improved the methods of work in every branch. Better techniques is the best weapon in competition, because better techniques secures extra profit at the cost of the rivals. This development increased the productivity of labor. This development made the goods for use and consumption cheaper, more abundant and more varied. This development increased the means of comfort and, by lowering the cost of living, i.e. the value of labor power, enormously raised the profit of capital. This high stage of technical development brought into the factory a rapidly increasing number of experts, engineers, chemists, physicists, well versed by their training at universities and laboratories in science. They are necessary to direct the intricate technical processes and to improve the intricate technical processes by regular application of new scientific discoveries. Under their supervision act skilled technicians and workers, so the technical organization shows a carefully regulated collaboration of various kinds of workers, a small number of university-trained specialists, a large number of qualified professionals and skilled workers, besides a great mass of unskilled workers to do the manual work. Their combined efforts are needed to run the machines and to produce the goods. The commercial organization has to conduct the sale of the product. The commercial organization studies markets and prices. The commercial organization advertises. The commercial organization trains agents to stimulate buying. The commercial organization includes the so-called scientific management to cut down costs by distributing men and means. The commercial organization devises incentives to stimulate the workers to more strenuous efforts. The commercial organization turns advertising into a kind of science taught even at universities. The commercial organization is not less. The commercial organization is even more important than technics to the capitalist masters. The commercial organization is the chief weapon in their mutual fight. From the point of view of providing society with society's life necessities, however, the commercial organization is an entirely useless waste of capacities. But also the form of technical organization are determined by the same motive of profit. Hence the strict limitation of the better paid scientific experts to a small number, combined with a mass of cheap, unskilled labor. Hence the structure of society at large, with its low pay and poor education for the masses. With its higher pay, so much as higher education demands for the constant filling of the ranks for a scientifically trained minority. These technical officials have not only the care of the technical process of production. Under capitalism, these technical officials also have to act as taskmasters of the workers, because under capitalism, production of goods is inseparably connected with production of profit, both being one and the same action. The two characters of the shop official, of a scientific leader of production, and of a commanding helper of exploitation are intimately combined, so their position is ambiguous. On the one hand, they are the collaborators of the manual workers, by their scientific knowledge directing the process of transformation of the materials, by their skill increasing the profits. They also are exploited by capital. On the other hand, they are the underlings of capital, appointed to hustle the workers and to assist the capitalist in exploiting the workers. It may seem that not everywhere the workers are thus exploited by capital. In public utility enterprises, for instance, or in cooperative factories. Even if we leave aside the fact that public utility enterprises, by the public utility enterprises profit, often must contribute to the public funds, thus relieving the taxes of the propertied classes, the difference with other business is not essential. As a rule, cooperatives have to compete with private enterprises, and public utilities are controlled by the capitalist public by attentive criticism. The usually borrowed capital needed in the business demands that capital's interest out of the profits. As in other enterprises, there is the personal command of a director and the forcing up of the tempo of the work. There is the same exploitation as in every capitalist enterprise. There may be a difference in degree. Part of what otherwise is profit may be used to increase the wages and improve the conditions of labor, but a limit is soon reached. In this respect, cooperatives may be compared with private model enterprises where sensible, broad-minded directors try to attach the workers by better treatment, by giving the workers the impression of a privileged position, and so are rewarded by a better output and increased profit. But it is out of the question that the workers here, or in public utilities or cooperatives, should consider themselves as servants of a community to which to devote all their energy. Directors and workers are living in the social surroundings and the feelings of their respective classes. Labor has here the same capitalist character as elsewhere. It constitutes its deeper essential nature under the superficial differences of somewhat better or worse conditions. Labor under capitalism, in its essential nature, is a system of squeezing. The workers must be driven to the utmost exertion of their powers, either by hard constraints or by the kinder arts of persuasion. Capital itself is in a constraint. If capital cannot compete, if the profits are inadequate, the business will collapse. Against this pressure, the workers defend themselves by continual instinctive resistance. If not, the workers willingly should give way more than their daily labor power would be taken from them. It would be an encroaching upon their funds of bodily power. Their vital power would be exhausted before their bodily power's time. Their vital power's time, as to some extent is the case now. Degeneration, annihilation of health and strength, of themselves and their offspring would be the result. So resist they must. Thus every shop, every enterprise, even outside the times of sharp conflict, of strikes or wage reductions, is the scene of a constant silent war, of a perpetual struggle, of pressure and counter-pressure, rising and falling under its influence. A certain norm of wages, hours and tempo of labor establishes itself, keeping them just at the limit of what is tolerable and intolerable. If intolerable, the total of production is affected. Hence the two classes, workers and capitalists, were having to put up with each other in the daily course of work, in deepest essence, by their opposite interest, are implacable foes, living when not fighting, in a land of armed peace. Labor in itself is not repulsive. Labor for the supplying of his needs is a necessity imposed upon man by nature. Like all other living beings, man has to exert man's forces to provide for his food. Nature has given them bodily organs and mental powers, muscles, nerves, and brains to conform to this necessity. Their wants and their means are harmoniously adapted to one another in the regular living of their life. So labor, as the normal use of their limbs and capacities, is a normal impulse for man and animal alike. In the necessity of providing food and shelter there is, to be sure, an element of constraint. Free spontaneousness in the use of muscles and nerves, all in their turn, in following every whim, in work or play, lies at the bottom of human nature. The constraint of his needs compels man to regular work, to suppression of the impulse of the moment, to exertion of his powers, to patient perseverance and self-restraint. But this self-restraint, necessary as this self-restraint is for the preservation of one's self, of the family, of the community, affords the satisfaction of vanquishing impediments in himself or the surrounding world, and gives the proud feeling of reaching self-imposed aims. Fixed by its social character, by practice and custom in family, tribe, or village, the habit of regular work grows into a new nature itself, into a natural mode of life, a harmonious unity of needs and powers, of duties and disposition. Thus in farming, the surrounding nature is transformed into a safe home through a lifelong heavy or placid toil. Thus in every people, each in its individual way, the old handicraft gave to the artisans the joy of applying their skill and fantasy in the making of good and beautiful things for use. All this has perished since capital became master of labor. In production for the market, for sale, the goods are commodities which, besides their utility for the buyer, have exchange value, embodying the labor implemented. This exchange value determines the money they bring. Formerly a worker in moderate hours, leaving room for occasional strong exertion, could produce enough for his living. But the profit of capital consists in what the worker can produce in surplus to his living. The more value the worker produces, and the less the value of what the worker consumes, the larger is the surplus value seized by capital. Hence his life necessities are reduced. His standard of life is lowered as much as possible. His hours are increased. The tempo of his work is accelerated. Now labor loses entirely its old character of pleasant use of body and limbs. Now labor turns into a curse and an outrage, and this remains its true character. However mitigated by social laws and by trade union action, both results of the desperate resistance of the workers against their unbearable degradation. What they may attain is to turn capital from a rude abuse into a normal exploitation. Still, then, labor, being labor under capitalism, keeps its innermost character of inhuman toil. The workers, compelled by the threat of hunger to strain their forces at foreign command, for foreign profit, without genuine interest, in the monotonous fabrication of uninteresting or bad things, driven to the utmost of what the overworked body can sustain, are used up at an early age. Ignorant economists, unacquainted with the nature of capitalism, seeing the strong aversion of the workers from their work, conclude that productive work, by its very nature, is repulsive to man, and must be imposed on unwilling mankind by strong means of constraint. Of course, this character of their work is not always consciously felt by the workers. Sometimes the original nature of work, as an impulsive eagerness of action, giving contentment, asserts itself, especially in young people, kept ignorant of capitalism and full of ambition to show their capacities as first-rate workers, feeling themselves moreover possessor of an inexhaustible labor power. Capitalism has its well-advised ways of exploiting this disposition. Afterwards, with the growing solicitudes and duties for the family, the worker feels caught between the pressure of the constraint and the limit of his powers, as in tightening fetters he is unable to throw off. And at last, feeling his forces decay at an age that for a middle-class man is the time of full and matured power, he has to suffer exploitation and tacit resignation, in continuous fear of being thrown away as a worn-out tool. Bad and damnable as work under capitalism may be, still worse is the lack of work. Like every commodity, labor power sometimes finds no buyer. The problematic liberty of the worker to choose his master goes hand in hand with the liberty of the capitalist to engage or dismiss his workers. In the continuous development of capitalism, in the founding of new enterprises and the decline or collapse of old enterprises, the workers are driven to and fro, are accumulated here, dismissed there. They must consider it good luck even when they are allowed to let themselves be exploited. Then they perceive that they are at the mercy of capital, that only with the consent of the masters they have access to the machines that wait for their handling. Unemployment is the worst scourge of the working class under capitalism. It is inherent in capitalism. As an ever-returning feature, unemployment accompanies the periodical crises and depressions, which under the entire reign of capitalism ravages society at regular intervals. They are a consequence of the anarchy of capitalist production. Each capitalist, as an independent master of his enterprise, is free to manage it at his will, to produce what he thinks profitable or to close the shop when profits are failing. Contrary to the careful organization within the factory, there is a complete lack of organization in the totality of social production. The rapid increase of capital through the accumulated profits, the necessity to find profits also for the new capital, urges a rapid increase of production, flooding the market with unsaleable goods. Then comes the collapse, reducing not only the profits and destroying the superfluous capital, but also turning the accumulated hosts of workers out of their factories. Out of the factories, throwing the workers upon their own resources or on meager charity. Then wages are lowered, strikes are ineffective, the mass of the unemployed presses as a high weight upon the working conditions. What has been gained by hard fight in times of prosperity is often lost in times of depression. Unemployment was always the chief impediment to a continuous raising of the life standard of the working class. There have been economists alleging that by the modern development of big business, this pernicious alternation of crises and prosperity would disappear. These economists expected that cartels and trusts, monopolizing as cartels and trusts do large branches of industry, would bring a certain amount of organization into the anarchy of production and smooth its irregularities. They did not take into account that the primary cause, the yearning for profit, remains, driving the organized groups into a fiercer competition, now with mightier forces. The incapacity of modern capitalism to cope with modern capitalism's anarchy was shown in a grim light by the world crisis of 1930. During a number of long years, production seemed to have definitely collapsed. Over the whole world, millions of workers, of farmers, even of intellectuals were reduced to living on the doles, which the governments by necessity had to provide. From this crisis of production, the present war crisis took its origin. In this crisis, the true character of capitalism and the impossibility to maintain it was shown to mankind as in a searchlight. There were the millions of people lacking the means to provide for their life necessities. There were the millions of workers with strong arms, eager to work. There were the machines in thousands of shops, ready to whirl and to produce an abundance of goods, but it was not allowed. The capitalist ownership of the means of production stood between the workers and the machines. This ownership, affirmed if necessary by the power of police and state, forbade the workers to touch the machines and to produce all they had they themselves and society needed for their existence. The machines had to stand and rust. The workers had to hang around and suffer want. Why? Because capitalism is unable to manage the mighty technical and productive powers of mankind to conform to their original aim, to provide for the needs of society. To be sure, capitalism now is trying to introduce some sort of organization and planned production. Its insatiable profit hunger cannot be satisfied within the old realms. It is driven to expand over the world, to seize the riches, to open the markets, to subject the peoples of other continents. In a fierce competition, each of the capitalist groups must try to conquer or to keep to themselves the richest portion of the world, whereas the capitalist class in England, France, Holland, made easy profits by the exploitation of rich colonies, conquered in former wars. German capitalism, with German capitalism's energy, German capitalism's capacities, German capitalism's rapid development, that had come too late in the division of the world, in the division of the colonial world, could only get German capitalism's share by striving for world power, by preparing for world war. German capitalism had to be the aggressor, the others were the defenders. So it was the first to put into action and to organize all the powers of society for this purpose, and then the others had to follow German capitalism's example. In this struggle for life between the big capitalist powers, the inefficiency of private capitalism could no longer be allowed to persist. Unemployment now was a foolish, nay, a criminal waste of badly needed manpower. A strict and careful organization had to secure the full use of all the labor power and the fighting power of the nation. Now the untenability of capitalism showed itself just as grimly from another side. Unemployment was now turned into its opposite, into compulsory labor. Compulsory toil and fighting at the frontiers where the millions of strong young men, by the most refined means of destruction, mutilate, kill, exterminate, quote, wipe out, end quote, each other, for the world power of their capitalist masters. Compulsory labor in the factories where all the rest, women and children included, are assiduously producing ever more of these engines of murder, whereas the production of the life necessities is constricted to the utmost minimum. Shortage in want in everything needed for life, and the falling back to the poorest and ugliest barbarism is the outcome of the highest development of science and technics, is the glorious fruit of the thinking and working of so many generations. Why? Because notwithstanding all delusive talk about community and fellowship, organized capitalism, too, is unable to handle the rich productive powers of mankind, the rich productive powers of mankind's true purpose, using the rich productive powers of mankind instead for destruction. Thus the working class is confronted with the necessity of the working class's self taking production in hand. The mastery over the machines, over the means of production, must be taken out of the unworthy hands that abuse them. This is the common cause of all producers, of all who do the real productive work in society, the workers, the technicians, the farmers. But it is the workers, chief and permanent sufferers from the capitalist system, and moreover, majority of the population, on whom it impends to free themselves and the world from this scourge. They must manage the means of production. They must be masters of the factories, masters of their own labor, to conduct it at their own mill. Then the machines will be put to their true use, the production of abundance of goods, to provide for the life necessities of all. This is the task of the workers in the days to come. This is the only road to freedom. This is the revolution for which society is ripening. By such a revolution, the character of production is entirely reversed. New principles will form the basis of society. First, because the exploitation ceases. The produce of the common labor will belong to all those who take part in it. No surplus value to capital anymore, and it is the claim of superfluous capitalists to part of the produce. More important still than the cessation of their share in the produce is the cessation of the capitalist command over the production. Once the workers are masters over the shops, the capitalists lose the capitalist power of leaving in disuse the machines, these riches of mankind, precious product of the mental and manual exertion of so many generations of workers and thinkers. With the capitalist disappears their power to dictate what superfluous luxuries or what rubbish shall be produced. When the workers have command over the machine, the workers will apply them for the production of all that the life of society requires. This will be possible only by combining all the factories as the separate members of one body into a well-organized system of production. The connection that under capitalism is the fortuitous outcome of blind competition and marketing, depending on purchase and sale, is then object of conscious planning. Then, instead of the partial and imperfect attempts at organization of modern capitalism that only lead to fiercer fight and destruction, come the perfect organization of production, growing into a worldwide system of collaboration, for the producing classes cannot be competitors, only collaborators. For the producing classes cannot be competitors, only collaborators. These three characteristics of the new production mean a new world: the cessation of the profit for capital, the cessation of unemployment of machines and men, the conscious adequate regulation of production, the increase of the produce through efficient organization, give to each worker a larger quantity of product with less labor. Now the way is open for a further development of productivity. By the application of all technical progress, the produce will increase in such a degree that abundance for all will be joined to the disappearance of toil. The end. Thank you so much for listening. Section 2 is titled Law and Property. That's the next section.